Then on Sports Central, we go for a college football game preview and prediction on the Week 8 matchup between the Utah Utes and the USC Trojans, two of your top teams in the Pac-12, as we look forward to Week 8 of action, and the pressure is on for both teams. You got two teams with one loss in the season to this point. I do think both teams are still contenders this season, but obviously this is a huge game for both teams in determining the ceiling for both teams moving forward in this 2023 season. So with that, we'll be covering a full game preview and prediction on this matchup here today. Let's get started with your team trends. Utah beat Cal last week 34-14. This team is 5-1 on the season, 2-1 in conference. And this is, they're a talented and experienced team here in Utah, but the problem is Cam Rising hasn't played a snap this season for the Utes. He's obviously such a significant part of this team, so to have that missing has obviously been really tough for this team. And offensively, it has definitely shown. This team hasn't been a very strong team offensively this season. Now, defense, they've been strong, and they're going to need their defense to really show up in this game. But for Utah, there's obviously that looming factor as to will Cam Rising even return in this season for Utah. That's definitely something that's in the question right now. But this team is 5-1, 2-1 in conference. USC on the other side lost to Notre Dame in a brutal game last weekend. 20-48 was the final score. 6-1 on the season now for USC. Now this team is still undefeated in the Pac-12, so they're really as much a contender as anybody in the Pac-12 right now. But obviously this is, for them, they really need to bounce back here if they want to remain in college football playoff contention. With how deep this season is, there's still a possibility USC can make a run here in the second half of the season and somehow get into the college football playoff. But obviously for both teams at this point, got to win out, got to get to the Pac-12 title game, and got to win that as well if you want any chance of making the playoff. Games will be on Saturday, October 21st in LA. USC is the home team for this one, and your kickoff is 5 p.m. Pacific. Spread's going with USC by 7. So the Trojans are favored by a touchdown here. Over-under is 53. And the FPI is going with USC as well, right around 70%. So USC is favored in this matchup, as you would probably expect, given the questions about Utah and also the talent that we know USC has. But obviously the Trojans, the last few games, especially on defense, have looked pretty terrible. So that's something you want to keep in mind. Series history, USC leads at 13-9. Utah has won the last 3 matchups against USC. We saw Utah obviously beat this USC team last season in the Pac-12 title game. That was the most notable game where USC would have, I really believe they would have been in the college football playoff if they could have won that matchup. So obviously there's going to be chip on their shoulder for USC in this matchup, considering that. And in the last 10 matchups, it's about 500. Utah leads at 6-4. Stat comparison, Utah is 112th in points per game. This offense has once again struggled, and when you're in a conference that is just full of stacked offenses, USC and Washington, and I'd throw Oregon in there, Oregon State, even Washington State. This is a Pac-12 that is stacked with strong offenses. Good thing is Utah probably has one of the best defenses in the conference, if not the best. You probably got Oregon or Utah as the best defense. But it's just the offense for Utah that just needs to get going if they want to be a big contender. This team has got the talent, they got the experience to be a big contender. Just hasn't gone their way this season with injuries and everything. And that shows in the pass yards game, 125th in the country, one of the worst teams in the nation in passing a game, 53rd in rush yards a game. And then for pass defense, they're 70th, obviously going up against the 6th-ranked pass offense in the country with Caleb Williams and this stacked receiving core. That's something that's going to be, Utah's going to have to be strong there. And their rush defense has generally been one of the best in the country this season, 3rd in the country in rush defense. And as for the Trojans, top team in the country in points per game, 90th in points allowed. They're 6th in pass yards a game, 56th in rushing. And then for yards allowed, 79th in both pass and rush defense. Your recent matchups, Utah beat Cal 34-14. They obviously had that loss to Oregon State there a couple of weeks ago, 7-21. Oregon State's turned out to be a really solid team this season. Only could put up 7 points there, and beat UCLA, but only put up 14 points. That's the most wild Pac-12 score of the season, beating UCLA 14-7, and what's been a conference full of shootouts this season. And then Weber State beat them 31-7, also beat Baylor on the road 20-13. As for USC, lost to Notre Dame 20-48, beat Arizona in triple overtime What a game that was, 43-41. Beat Colorado 48-41. Beat Arizona State 42-28. Obviously beat Stanford 56-10. I mean, since that Stanford matchup, since their first bye week, this team just does not look the same. The Arizona State game, Arizona State's probably the worst team in the Pac-12. And they really hung around for a long time in the matchup. That was definitely a concerning one. And they went to Boulder, took on Colorado, really were dominant in the first half, and then somehow let Colorado score so many points in the second half and only ended up being a touchdown win. And then obviously against Arizona. Arizona is a dark horse in the conference. They're actually pretty good despite being a 3-loss football team, but either way, triple overtime against Arizona. I mean, if you want to be a college football playoff contender, got to be more dominant, especially against teams like Arizona. Key points, Utah 5-1. Defensively, they could be the best in the Pac-12. Wouldn't be surprised. I mean, the pass defense hasn't been quite as good, but you're also going up against a gauntlet of quarterbacks in the Pac-12. But for Utah, the offense has struggled without Cam Rising. That's obviously a big question mark that we've mentioned. But, I mean, for them, got to force turnovers here. If this team can force turnovers, maybe even get a defensive touchdown or something, like something on special teams, that would go a long way for Utah in this matchup. And I think that's going to be critical for the Utes if they want a chance of winning this one against a really strong USC offense. And I mean, for the Trojans on the other side, this game is going to tell a lot about this team, and can they bounce back from the brutal loss to Notre Dame last week? They just haven't been the same since their first bye week. I mean, this is the last 4 games. This team has been not a top 10 team for sure, and so for USC, this is where they need to get back on track. This is a team that is talented enough to be a true national contender. I mean, in the preseason, there's a reason why this team was picked by so many to get to the college football playoff, or at least make a run for it. And this is a really strong team offensively. They've scored 40 plus multiple times this season. Really, the one main exception for this offense being strong was last week, scoring 20 against Notre Dame. But the defense needs to be better for this team. It was the same issue last season. This offense could have won a national title. Defensively, not even close. And so far this season, we've kind of seen that be similar, and we thought the defense would be better this season. It just hasn't. So that's got to be better for USC, and this is a critical game for both teams, but especially for USC to remain a contender. I feel like Utah at this point, it's really tough to see this team making a run for the college football playoff given all that's happened with injuries and everything, but USC is still in that picture. They're talented enough to do it, and they're still undefeated in conference, but obviously it's about bouncing back and remaining in contention and being consistent down the stretch. So with that, let's get the prediction here for Utah and USC. Big Pac-12 showdown coming up here in Week 8. And in this one, I do want to go USC. It's just a matter of how much, and I will be taking USC 38-27 here. So I think USC finds a way. I think this offense finally clicks again, and Utah's defense, I think, is very much good enough to keep them in this game, but I do think this team starts to click again in USC. And obviously, I mean, it was very disappointing last week, and you can't guarantee that this team will bounce back this week given what happened against Notre Dame. But I think USC being at home, finally, I mean, the pressure's on for this team, and they know that they're talented enough to win a title this season. And so the Trojans find a way. 38-27. I still think they allow 27 points, which would actually be quite a bit for Utah considering where this offense has been for a good chunk of the season. But USC's defense still got to figure it out. I do think we see more of a higher scoring game in the end. USC is going to win 55%. Honestly, you could probably bump that to 60%, but either way, I think USC wins it over on the points, and then USC to cover the spread in the end, which is currently a touchdown towards the Trojans. So I'm going to take that as well, and USC gets back on track in this matchup. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below on USC Utah. I appreciate you guys all watching as always. Stay tuned for more from All Sports Central. Catch you on the next one.